Welcome to the Growth Over Grades podcast, a show connecting you with thought leaders, pioneers, and change agents who are leading the charge to support schools and districts making the shift toward competency-based education and to promote growth over grades. I'm Jordan Lewis, and on the show today, we have visionary leader, author, podcaster, speaker, and the 2025 COSN CTO of the Year, Alana Winnick. Alana is an active participant in helping to shape the future of our education system. As the author of The Generative Age, a book and podcast that explores the rapidly evolving world of generative AI and its transformative impact on education. She brings this dynamic perspective to her roles as the Educational Technology Director and Data Protection Officer for Bocanico Hills School District, and Director for the New York State Association for Computers and Technology in Education. She has pioneered innovative projects that harness her extensive expertise in childhood education, educational technology, and educational leadership. Beyond her administrative work, Alana is a champion of student voice, founding Students for Innovation to empower students to advocate for change within their schools. Today, we dive deep into the impact of generative AI in the classroom, what it means to truly prepare the next generation of leaders, and how we can foster systematic change by empowering students to advocate for innovation in their own learning environments. Now, to my conversation with Alana Winnick. All right, Alana. Well, first off, thank you so much for joining us on the show here today. I'm super excited for today's conversation for a lot of reasons. The time of our recording coincides with me heading back from a conference topic. AI, it's everywhere. What does that actually mean in education? How do we maintain humanity in our education, in our classrooms? You're gonna shed a lot of light into that. So thank you so much for joining us here today on the show.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And as I was saying before, it's such a coincidence that this call is happening today because tomorrow we have our onboarding call for Spaces EDU. So it's quite the timing.
It's all about timing.
Yeah.
But all this to say, we're going to be diving into a lot of important topics. But first and foremost, where we're going to start is around the generative age. So the generative age, some of your work that you've done recently, just let's break it down, that word, that term, the generative age. Like, what does that mean when you are referencing it in today's age?
Yeah, so when I came up with the title, it started with my podcast, then evolved into my book. I was struggling for the book title. I'm like, I'll just use my podcast title. So when I came up with that title, The Generative Age, people didn't understand what it meant because they were just saying AI. There's multiple types of artificial intelligence. And when AI got released, like AI has been around for a very long time. It hasn't just gotten released. But the type of AI that we see that we're now mind blown by is generative artificial intelligence. And that's not even necessarily new. It's just advanced so much that it's so usable for the common everyday human being, which it hadn't been before. Right. So that generative artificial intelligence is a type of artificial intelligence. And the way I came up with the word, the generative age, it's like an age or an era of generative content. So in a world where you can generate assignments, you can generate images, you could generate videos, you can generate multiple things. It's just an era or age of generating. And for me, it really impacts how we think and how we learn and how we create. And I think it's a whole new era where you can be a lot more efficient, a lot more effective, and spend your time really doing a lot of the human skills that you didn't have time to do before. Spend more time doing deeper thinking, creativity, amplifying, and those human skills by eliminating those silly things that you probably didn't need to spend your time on before.
Yeah, I love the call out to the human skills because we talk often about what if I had 15 extra minutes to write, or we often hear, oh, I can't believe I have to do this again. Or those mundane tasks, where you're in your work day and you used to be, I could put on music and just do that 45-minute data entry task that I have to do once a week. Like those are eliminated. Imagine what you can do. So I love the call out to that, And I also think that there's a lot to be said about the ongoing development of the human skill, and it's putting a lot of focus on that for us, not only in the classroom, but kind of broadly in society.
Yeah. I mean, the human skills are more important than ever right now.
I'm curious, before we kind of talk more about the book, and this is something that happened to me very recently, and I was going through with a creative task, and I thought to myself, oh, I'll go to AI and I'll do a really good prompt. I'll spend a lot of time writing a really, really good prompt, and we'll dive in and I'll use it for advice. And then I completed the task and I got the output that I had hoped for after a bit of iteration. And I thought to myself, I can't believe that I went to AI first, whereas I used to just openly brainstorm. Yeah. Am I losing something with this? Am I losing something?
It's really funny because I was with a former colleague who I had not seen, honestly, in many years. And we had worked on a creative project together, and we were so witty and creative. And when I look back on that, like, it's a level of intelligence when you could get to that level of wit. And we had so much fun, like word smithing and word playing with each other to be that witty. And now we find that we just go to AI, and I was asking her about that. I was like, how do you feel about the fact that, like, your first move is to go to AI to do that? And then we were talking about it, and we said, well, we at least love that we grew our minds by doing it with our human brain. So now we're just expediting it. But that's something to think about when you think about any of this stuff in a classroom with children, right? And this is why I always say, I never, ever want you to get rid of foundational skills. I think those are incredibly important, right? But once a child has mastered something, let's say they mastered a skill in 3rd grade, and now they're in 5th grade or 6th grade, then why are we wasting their time doing it anymore? They've mastered it. They can use AI for that skill that they've already mastered, because the teacher's always like, we don't have time. Like we come up with all these, and thinking about Spaces EDU and Portrait of a Graduate and project-based learning, all these awesome creative projects. But then the teachers always say, I don't have time.
Right.
Well, like, yes, you could have time if you use AI to save you time for the things we've already mastered, right? So, but I do think it's important to keep each foundational skill and make sure we do work on that. And one of those is creative thinking, critical thinking, and I mean, a million other things, but yeah.
Yeah. And to just kind of build on that, I know in the book, Generative Age, you discuss a lot about opportunities, but also key considerations for embedding AI into the classrooms. So just kind of start off, like, where do you see educators going wrong when we start talking about integration in the classroom? And then from there, we'll kind of transition to see, hey, where are you seeing like the best positive interactions? But let's talk about the things you see kind of happening wrong first.
So this is the blocking or the banning conversation. We don't really hear that so much more anymore in 2025. But I think what I still, in my own district, we don't talk about it, but when I travel around and hear other teachers or leaders in conversation, this idea of plagiarism or cheating, that is, I don't like that conversation at all, because my question back to a teacher is, if you were going to assume that children were going to use AI on their assignments, because they will, then what would you do to change the assignment?
You're asking the wrong questions.
Right. So I think we need to rethink teaching, rethink learning, rethink assessment. So if they're coming to me with that question, that's the wrong, that's a misstep. It's a wrong question, because it's really on you. What are you going to do to change the assignment? So that is one misstep. I don't think teachers do this, because I think that this is what they're cognizant of, but treating AI as like a shortcut instead of a tool for deeper learning.
Right.
Yes, you could use it as a shortcut, like I mentioned before, if you master the skill, but they can also use it for deeper learning. And I think maybe their first step is using it as a shortcut so they can play with it. But I think the end goal really is using AI to help you learn more deeply. And I have so many students that ask AI to quiz them at, say, give me more challenging questions. And it really helps them dive deeper into their own learning. So I think that's a misstep turned positive. And a very big one that I really believe in a lot is I don't like when people leave students out of the conversation. I think that they have a lot to say about this topic. They know a lot more than many of the adults. We have students as young as third grade teaching professional development to our teachers and speaking on national panels, actually. So I think students have a lot to say. They can see how this can help them as learners. Another misstep is if we do not teach students how to use this, then we're causing a much larger digital divide that may not have to do with socioeconomic status. And it also puts like equity gaps. And also, like, when we're going to talk about the opportunities, where I'm going to shift here is I really, really believe that the biggest opportunity that I see is helping students with learning differences. Maybe they're a multilingual learner. Maybe English isn't their first language. Maybe they have dyslexia. Maybe they have, there's a whole laundry list of things that they can have, right? And AI really levels that playing field. And it really provides every single student with equitable access to knowledge, which is so incredibly important. And I think if you're a leader listening to this, the place I would start is in your student support services, because when those teachers create materials for their students, those materials, like school AI space, could be used for the whole class, and the whole class could benefit. Then that general education teacher that maybe wasn't using it might be like, wow, this is amazing. I want to start using it too. So I really see that opportunity with students with any type of learning difference. I think another one, a misstep and an opportunity also, I think that people throw the term personalized learning around a lot. Because for me, there's a very big difference with enhanced learning versus personalized learning. AI, for the most of the time, it enhances learning. True personalized learning is when you and I are on the same path, sitting in the same lesson, doing the same thing, that's not personalized learning. If you can finish third grade math next week and move on to fourth grade math, that's personalized. AI could be a tool to help you personalize learning, but AI itself does not personalize learning.
Right.
So I think that's just a misstep, but an opportunity if you use it in the right way.
I think it's really challenging too, Alana, because a lot of teachers maybe don't or haven't yet taken the time to fully grasp these capabilities. I read an article recently, and on average, the average person off of the street is using a large language model as an abbreviated version of Google. They're just doing searches, and they're using it to quickly pull up information, and they don't go any deeper than that.
And it might not even be true.
Of course, right? And then there's all those sort of challenges. So when the general population is thinking of the tools as that's kind of what it is, it really becomes a blocker to the utilization of it in an effective way.
Yeah, for sure.
I want us to just dive into some really cool examples. You mentioned, the student who can quiz themselves in advance to really drive deeper learning. I've seen classroom teachers where they take a article of the day and they'll leverage AI to adjust the reading levels for the different populations of students in their class, so every student can have good comprehension on that content and they can discuss it openly. Do you have any other really kind of positive examples that you're seeing happening?
Yeah. So you just sparked something in my mind. When we talk about missteps, and now we're talking about good examples. Here's an analogy. I just find it really funny. All these AI companies are telling teachers, we're going to save you time. Use our tool. And the AI creates the assignment, right? It helps them create an assignment. Right. then the kids are going home and using AI on the assignment. And then the other AI tool is going to grade it, and the AI is going to grade it. So the AI creates it, does it, and grades it. And then what's the point of the assignment? I'm not sure anymore. So that's why we have to rethink what we're asking them to do. But when you look at opportunities, I want to look at that last one, and it's a good example. Why is the teacher using AI to grade the student's assignment? What we need to do, and a great example, is to teach students how to put their own work through AI and get their own feedback on their work to help improve their work. So that's a great example. And if you're doing this in like a younger grade, the teacher can make a custom GPT space in something like School AI or something similar. And they can upload the assignment description, the rubric, and anything else like that. The student could put their work in and get feedback on their work. This is where your strengths are. This is where you need to improve. Here's some recommendations. So teaching students how to use AI on their own to get their own feedback is a great example. Having students learn how to, I think helpful prompts that my students know is things like, give me 5 examples. So then they get multiple perspectives, or put it in bulleted format so it's chunked for them, or explain it to me like I'm 5. So then if it's something super complicated, they can get it broken down in a very simple way. So I think the great examples are teaching students how to prompt to get what they need, or teaching an E&L student how to translate so the content is in their native language and they can focus on the content, not on the translation. Another just super fun example that we've done is we have family and consumer science, and we have a garden. And so the students we're very culturally diverse. We represent over 100 countries in our tiny little school district. And 2 people had worked together as partners and had to create a fusion recipe with your culture and my culture. And then the twist was they had to add an ingredient from the garden too. So could the teacher sit there and interview every kid and help them brainstorm this? No. We've designed a space. The students went in. The space said, what's your culture? What's your partner's culture? What are ingredients you love from yours? What are ingredients? And help them create this super creative fusion recipe. And then the teacher, who couldn't meet with every group every day, was able to look through the transcript and look through the chat and see what the students were thinking about. So the next day when she had conferences with them, she was really able to help guide their dish that they were designing. So it really helps the teacher who wouldn't have time to meet with every single student or every single group, the time to reflect and come back. And they can even use AI and say, oh, here's some data from my class. Which students need to be pulled tomorrow for higher level help, or which students need to be pulled for extra support. So those are really great examples that I can think of.
I'm sure for the folks listening, you could probably name another 101 great examples. So throw it on the comment. If you're watching this on YouTube, put it in the comments. If you're on your podcast app, comment so that we can start compiling all these great ideas, because I think that's another big asset. And in talking with a lot of teachers, they obviously know of it. Anywhere you go, any PD landscape, the talk on these tools is present. But again, I come back to a lot of teachers are hesitant to dive in. They don't really know how it works, and they don't fully comprehend the utility of these tools. So they never dive in to get started. So if we can help teachers bridge that gap by coming up with some easy getting started places, Oh,
also for students, if your Google Notebook LM is really awesome, and students could just upload all their notes, materials, and they could create these little podcast style audio clips that sound exactly like us talking to each other. And it's another way for them to engage with their content and receive it in a different format. So that's just another, and they can make flashcards and they can get quizzed on their content. So that's just another really fun thing.
And you saying the idea of how they engage and receive content, I think also can really dovetail nicely into how students can show mastery of content using differentiated manners. If I myself, obviously I love audio formats, or else I wouldn't be having today's call.
Right.
So I love when I hear examples of teachers saying, okay, we're going to learn about the Civil War in social studies, and instead of writing a traditional essay, you're going to create your argument about a perspective, but how you deliver me that content is going to be up to you, right? And I think with so many students, as we think about, career readiness and what the future looks like, they all see these people like YouTubers, and that's what they want to be in. So I chatted with a teacher, and they said, well, what we did is we actually broke down what needs to be done in order for something like a YouTube content creation to be done. So the student backwards designed that and understood all the script writing and all the key skills. And it ended up crossing across multiple different disciplines, but it was rooted in the content tied to the standard, i.e., that Civil War argumentative essay. And they created a podcast, or they created a piece of YouTube content. And I think, Alana, that's where what you were mentioning earlier about we need to rethink how we're teaching and how students can deliver content needs to come into play here.
100%.
But just to shift gears slightly, the Students for Innovation. Talk to us a little bit about the Students for Innovation. I know that you're working and doing some really great advocacy with this group. You mentioned it already. You love to put students in the center of the work. So I'm curious, just break down a bit about what the Students for Innovation is.
So that sort of happened organically. I'm a technology director in a school district. I work with my own students. And then through all this other speaking and writing, I am able to connect with people all over the country and the world. And 2 students had found me on their own. One just filled out my contact form on my website. And another one, I was on a Zoom with her teacher. And then she said to me, hey, I know you only interview experts on your podcast, but I think you should interview students because they have a lot to say. I was like, oh yeah, what do you have to say? And she actually had a lot to say. And then the boy who had filled out my contact me form was telling me all about all these great things he was doing in his district. He was looking for a mentor that really understood the work to support him. And they were really doing great things. And so I brought them together. They had never, I don't even think they've ever met each other. They're coincidentally both from the same state. And I was supporting them in initiatives in their district because they didn't feel that they were getting the education that they needed as a student. So I was helping them respectfully advocate and make change in their own districts. And I was like, okay, well, I'm a leader in my own district. And yes, I'm advocating and making change, but what can I do as an educator in my own district with my own students? So I had started an innovation club with students as young as 4th grade. And my students do everything from they open superintendent's conference day for us as young as 3rd grade. They present at board meetings. They host professional development sessions for teachers. I throw, and we're talking about human skills. I have VR headsets that I bought a couple of years ago, thousands of dollars, never used. So why aren't they used? The teachers don't feel comfortable with
Right.
You don't feel comfortable with AI. You're going to give them a piece of hardware right now. They don't feel comfortable, right? So I'm like, okay, let's remove the barrier that's holding them back. The barrier is them not feeling comfortable. So I threw the VR headsets in front of the kids. I said, figure it out, figure out how to use them. They realized they were named wrong. We renamed them. We relabeled them. The directions were wrong. They remade the directions. They made posters on Canva. They invited the teachers in, and they taught the teachers how to use the VR headsets. And now that teacher knows, all the teachers know, if you have an innovation club kid in your class, they can run the entire experience. You don't even need to know how if you don't want to. Or if you're in a younger grade, younger than 4th, then the students will get volunteer hours to go push into the classrooms. But the students are really leading change, and they're advocating, and we learn what respectful advocating looks like because they are, a child and we are an adult. So they know that how they learn how to speak to adults and ask for things in a respectful way, and how to not act like they have all the answers, but they do come with solutions in an appropriate manner. But it's really about providing all students with the knowledge and skills they need to make change in their schools, which are lifelong human skills they will need in their life. These students have also hosted their own virtual led summits. The recordings are all available online. We had students as far as India, and they present on anything that they're passionate about. So one presented on financial literacy, one presented on game-based learning. We had one on coding. We obviously had one on AI. But I think that a lot of times that we try to be the knowledge bearers, and it's students have a lot to contribute. I'm a very tiny district. I have no one. It's me. I don't have a STEM integrator, I don't have a tech coach, none of them. So what do? I have an army of children who are ready and willing to step up to provide professional development for the teachers. And this is very important life skills, leadership skills, speaking skills, critical thinking skills, like the laundry list of skills that they're learning goes on. And so we want to provide those opportunities for students all over the world. So if there's an educator like me that wants to start a club in their district, or if there's a student that wants to start their own initiative in their own district, it's a place for us all to come together to share what's working. So this is what works for me. Maybe it doesn't work for you. This is what's working for you. And so we all share what's working and what's not, and we learn and grow together so that we can make change in our districts. And I've had students sit with the Board of Education developing policies. I brought a student to ISTE with me. I'll be bringing several students with me to FETC. And when you get the right students, it can't just be, any student, and they say it in a specific way. The teachers listen. They do.
Right.
Like it hits a lot harder when it's coming from a student than when it's coming from me. And I try to pick students. Like I have a student who just graduated from our E&L program, talk about how all these tools help him as an English language learner. If the E&L teacher's standing there talking about this will help your E&L students, it's way different when the kid is standing up there talking about how these tools help him.
Yeah.
And so I think it just hits home a little bit more.
And it's such an opportunity to empower students and empower student voice in a unique way. I mean, we've seen and heard these amazing stories of students helping to bring about, curriculum change because they felt, hey, my culture is underrepresented in this curriculum. We need to bring that about. And it is a really impactful way to lead change. And why I think I love it so much hearing, stories like this is we're all doing this work for kids, and everybody who I speak to, when you say, dive into the why, like, why do you do what you do every day? They all say, well, it's to help kids. It's to help, the future.
But you realize we're talking about them and not with them. There's
Exactly. And that's where I think this is a really nice distinction of kind of how you center some of this work. And I'm curious, in having a lot of conversations with students, like what are they sharing about the current state of their schooling, and like what do the kids want to see?
So what's really frustrating for them? They might have a teacher that embraces this and uses it in such an amazing, powerful way, and they had this incredible experience. And then the summer happens, and now they come into school, and the next teacher isn't using it or talking about it. And when you have had these opportunities that some of them have had, and then you're basically ripping the rug out right from underneath them and taking it all away. And what they believe it could and should look like, it no longer looks like. And for that child, it's very frustrating.
Right.
And that's more of like an elementary. When you get into the secondary, they might have like one teacher that's doing it if they're lucky or happy. Where it also starts to get confusing for students is, I always say it needs to be assignment by assignment guidelines, because in one district it might look one way, in another district it might look a different way. In the same district, from school to school, it might look different. Then you go from teacher to teacher. So that kid that's traveling in secondary from one class across the hall to the other class, what was allowed in one class is not allowed in the other class. So that's confusing. And then within the same class that might allow it, today this was okay and tomorrow that's not okay, right? So it's just very, very confusing for them. So I think that my students had actually made conversation starters that are available on the website and the resources, conversation starters and scenarios, and just having discussions. Like the students want the teachers to have discussions about this. Let's open the dialogue. Let's talk about it. What's okay, what's not okay. And being explicit, like, is this okay today? Is this not okay? Like, they have no idea. So that's something they want. They really, really don't like, I'll tell you what, they don't like traditional writing. But if you turn it into a project, and AI is maybe a tool, they love projects. Is it writing? Yes. They just don't realize it's writing. They love like project-based learning. They love like real world relevance, right? So if you're just making them do something that they consider busy work and there's no real world relevance, then they don't see a point in it, and they just feel like you're wasting their time. They don't love like skill and drill boring types of work. They love like creation. So like creation versus consumption. They just want things to feel like it's relevant, really.
And I feel like, you can go and they can get access to all content immediately, right? And I feel like they're growing up in an age where the internet has always been there, so the access to information is instant, and that's why I hear so much of they want the real world relevance. They want to apply what they're learning. And if we as a school system can adjust how we measure student growth to application to demonstrate mastery, I think it's by and large going to be a much more successful system. But when I was in school, so much of what was done is, you probably had the same conversation, is I'm never going to use this in the world.
Yeah.
And that's still happening how many years later, but why is it happening when the students can access that content? And when I was a former teacher, I never did closed book tests. Now, yes, I still had a traditional classroom and I still did testing. However, I never did a closed book test. And my students would say, Mr. Lewis, like, why? No other teacher does this. And my response was, well, the real world is open book. It's
so true, because like you have this in your hand at all times. It's just... And now, like I have Meta Ray-Bans, but now the new Meta Ray-Bans have a screen in the lens. The world that they're about to graduate into is just a different world than when we were in school. And there's no arguing it. Even if you just graduated a year ago, when they graduate, it will be much different. It's guaranteed. And I just think our job as educators is to prepare students for their future, right? And many people might not agree with this, so I'll preface with that. Our job, I don't believe, is to prepare students to excel on standardized tests. And a lot of times when you're in a traditional classroom, you see a lot of this skill and drill and test prep type stuff. We should
just like stop and celebrate that statement for a moment. Just there it is. Yes.
It's so true. And then our job really is to prepare them for when they are in our world, in our seats, when they're our age, right? So podcasting, great example. How much work does it go into to put on a good podcast? There's so many skills that they're still teaching in school, but they could just make it something a little bit more relevant, a little bit more real world. And the example I like to use, because I think it's just a very basic one that most people can relate to, is let's say a student is a landscaper. They're very good at just, mowing lawns, trimming bushes, a very basic landscaping. Now they want to move on to having their own landscaping company. But they may not have the reading and writing level of a 12th grader. And that's okay. But we can level the playing field and provide them with the knowledge, skills, and tools they need to thrive. They can use AI as a tool, or not even that, like a dyslexic student, or like we're talking about anyone, but by providing them with the tools they need to level the playing field and thrive, that is our job. Because when your students come back to you many years later and are like, look where I am now, you want that as an educator. That's like your dream, is for your students to come back to you that many years later and be like, look at me. And that's not through skill and drill test prep. That is not. So I don't know. It's something I'm very passionate and strong about.
Well, and you mentioning that our jobs is to prepare students for their future really resonates, because we hear it all the time. We're trying to prepare students for the future.
No, it's not the future. It's their future. And I don't like it when people say, we need to prepare students for what it looks like in 2035. No, we need to prepare students for anything, period. anything.
100% agree. And just to build on this, you were mentioning earlier a lot about 21st century skills and those human skills that are so pivotal to help students thrive in what their future is going to become. And, I saw an article lately that said, 90% of jobs are going to be taken over by AI. And I find that laughable because no, it's not actually going to happen. It's people that understand how to use these tools are going to be overtaking people that don't know how to leverage these tools. So
it's funny. One of my best friends, he went to MIT and he coded and founded his own company, and they were hiring for someone last week, and they brought the person, they gave him a task to do, and the person submitted their response, and someone on his existing team ran it through an AI detector, which we all know in education does not work. I hope if you don't know it, learn it. It doesn't work. And we don't like to create a culture where we're saying gotcha. Having a gotcha culture is not a positive thing, but it's also a lot of false positives and they're not accurate. So don't use them. So I told him that, and he's like, oh, that's interesting. But he said, I actually don't care if he used AI because his response was so much more creative than anyone else on my team. And if he could get there and be more efficient and more effective, then why would I care? And in the real world, that's what bosses want. They want you to be efficient. They want you to be effective. And guess what? You're going to be less burnt out. You're going to be happier. You're going to be a happier, more productive employee. And those are the skills they're going to need. So by you not teaching them how to use AI in school, it's putting them at a disadvantage because someone else who's efficient and effective is going to get the job over them. And that's just the reality.
So I'm curious, after we, like that example kind of cements it in a real world way, and America Succeeds has done an amazing study where they combed through an atrociously large amount of job listings to determine, what is it that real world employers are seeking. And by and large, it's transferable 21st century skills. Yeah. The top 5 to 8 things that every single job is asking for is that. So I'm curious how you're seeing schools begin to adapt or come to terms with that focus to ensure, hey, our students are getting the opportunity to learn these skills.
So I opened up to it because I knew this question was coming up. Portrait of a Graduate's a very big thing right now in New York State, and I'm very excited about that. But when I had written my book, long before Portrait of a Graduate was a thing, I created what I called a passport to success. Okay. And I created 10 skills that I thought that students needed to be successful in their future. So it's everything from emotional intelligence and empathy, creativity and innovation, collaboration and teamwork, adaptability and resilience, digital literacy, critical thinking, problem solving, lifelong learning, the list goes on. So those are kind of the things that I came up with. But what I see in my own district, I'm working with my administration on, we have a very big digital wellness initiative going on at the same time, which seems like counterintuitive, but they actually go so nicely together. Mm-hmm. Not all screen time is created equal. There's a very big difference in creation versus consumption. There's a very big difference of a student going on a skill and drill platform and just doing repetitive rote memorization or, rote kind of stuff versus them being knowledge creators, creating content, creating videos like we were talking about, YouTube's podcasts, books on Book Creator, whatever it might be, or presenting, right? So what happens in a classroom is if you're finished with your work early, you get more busy work. That's what happens. You are punished and you do more work because you finish your work early. I just have a problem with that. Maybe pick up a book and read. That's an acceptable.
I was literally going to just say, I loved in class. I can remember getting that 15 minutes. Oh, you get your book out, but that doesn't seem to be the norm.
No, but it could be. Or if you're going to go on the computer, and this is where leaders need to come in to create this menu of options of, in your own, if you're a teacher, you could obviously, if you're listening and want to do this, but if you're a leader and you have teachers who don't think of these creative ideas on their own, you could come up with this menu. Like if they're done with their work, don't have them. I'm not going to say any vendor names because that might be negative. Don't go on these software to do busy work. Go on these ones because these are really going to be developing the students' human, critical 21st century type skills that they need to thrive. You're done with your math. I want you to create a YouTube style video explaining this concept to someone else. If you understand it so thoroughly that you can explain it to someone else, and now you're learning a million other skills. So I think that it's just shifting how we use screen time and shifting the types of activities that we're asking of our students to do. And I always use this framework when we rethink lessons. I gave you the analogy before with the AI creating it, doing it, and grading it. To rethink the what, the why, and the how. Rethink what we are asking our students to do, why we are asking them to do it, and how we are assessing them. And that assessment piece is really important because in a world where AI can do your work for you in 3 seconds, then you really need to rethink that assignment. And if you're not sure, take the assignment, copy it, paste it in AI. If the AI can do it, it's probably, I'm not going to say it's not, but it's probably not a good assignment and you should rethink it.
I also love under that idea of rethinking how screen time takes shape in the classroom, districts that are leveraging capstones for this and creating an opportunity to say, hey, you are going to have a multi-year experience. And I've seen a lot of school districts that instead of assigning the busy work will say, oh, that becomes free capstone time for you to work on a passion project.
You remember 20 time? It was called 20%, or it's like Google had this thing called 20 time, I think. Or it's like Genius Hour. Other places call it that. So I think like we should bring back project-based learning. We should bring back Genius Hour or 20 time. Those are great things to do. But you just reminded me of something else. So a teacher asked for a piece of software. I'm just going to be vague and not say the teacher or the subject or whatever. And I had said to the administration, that is a very traditional skill and drill type of software.
Right.
As a leader right now, when we are making decisions to onboard new software, we are showing our teachers what we are valuing. Right? Tomorrow, we're onboarding with Spaces EDU. That's a very different type of software and value than a skill and drill software. So I think the tools you put students on as a teacher, you are showing them what you value. As a leader, the tools you are onboarding or the tools that you are advocating for shows what you value. And I personally value skills that support students to be successful in their future. That's my belief.
And to keep sort of rolling on this idea, we know that mindset shifts need to take place in a broad way. You mentioned it earlier, and I'm going to pull it back. The role of the teacher needs to shift, and we do see it shifting in certain pockets from the owner of knowledge to a dispenser and a supporter.
Yeah.
But when we're now thinking about leaders, because we're leaders that have worked their way into a position of authority, like what are some fundamental shifts that they need to undergo so that they're not just adopting it because it's the new thing, but they're adopting it thoughtfully so that we can set up the system to thrive?
So you're talking about a rollout or a mindset shift?
I like the idea of a mindset shift. Like if I'm a leader, I've been a district leader for 30 years or I've been in a traditional classroom. Like what are some mindset shifts I need to have so I can actually be thoughtful about rolling out AIs?
Okay, so AI should be a tool. It's just a tool. It's an amazing, valuable tool, but it's just a tool. So I think where a lot of leaders struggle, and I do work a lot right now in the building leadership space. I've been doing a lot of work over the summer in that space across the country. And I think building leaders really are the key to this, because you can make decisions at the district level, but unless the building leader's on board, it's not happening, right? The teachers are going to look to their boss and say, do I really have to do that? Mm. And if the building leader's not modeling it or supporting the initiative, it's probably not going to happen. So once you have your leaders on board, district leaders and building leaders, then the next thing I think is understanding when you walk in a classroom what it could and should look like. So when you're doing formal observations or informal observations or just doing your walkthroughs, you're like, hey, did you check this out? It might be helpful. Or, oh, you should see what so-and-so is doing over there in their room. And I think it's just about normalizing it. I think you have to, what I do, this is my favorite thing. This is a great thing for school leaders. I don't make it its own initiative. I sneak it into other initiatives. So last year we still do have a very big PBIS initiative, positive behavior-based intervention services. We were having teachers create these morning community building activities. Do you think a teacher can create 180 creative community building activities? There's no way. So there's a 5-minute tech integration where they opened AI and I made Mad Lib style prompts, copy and paste and say 15 minutes, third grade student, whatever the skill is. And they were just Mad Lib style prompts, copy and paste it. They got something they can use immediately the next day. So I think infusing it into something else, walking away with something you could use immediately, having it be ongoing, so it's not like a separate thing. I think just normalizing it and modeling it is super important, the most important. And then shifting from teacher use to student use, that's where the big mindset shift is. So in my own district, we do 3 years, but I like to call them phases, because when you're at the teacher level, some teachers could get to year 3 in 2 months. So right. I like to call them phases, not years. But it would be, what do we need to do? What do we want to do? And what do we aspire to do? And what I aspire to do is have AI in the hands of students. Sometimes it's difficult for teachers they think they need to be the knowledge bearers, and it's hard for them to shift their mind that it's okay, it's actually an ISTE standard, to learn alongside your students. So that's right. A shift for teachers and a shift for leaders to be okay that we're all learning this together. And I think that I have built a community in my district where we say failure stands for first attempt in learning. We're all learning, we're all growing. We learn from teachers, we learn from leaders, we learn from students, and we learn from everyone. And just shifting your mind of this culture that celebrates trying and celebrates both your failures and your successes, and a culture that embraces a community of learners. And then when we shift into that classroom space again, really rethinking the assessment. So as that leader that's pushing in, right, I'm going to give you, it's again, a very generic example I think people can relate to. A persuasive essay. What's the point of a persuasive essay? To persuade the reader to think differently. Who's the reader? Usually your audience of one person, your teacher. The kid does it, they hand it in, they get a good enough grade, they don't care, they move on with their life. Keeping the integrity of the assignment and using my framework, rethinking the what, the why, the how, and shifting your mindset on the assessment piece, really, you can transform that same thing into a TED Talk. Right? Mm-hmm. The student has to stand in front of an audience. We have third graders do this in front of their parents and community and persuade the audience to think differently about something. So that's real life, real world skills right there, right? There's so many things, and they're going to go back. They're going to revise. That's all a teacher ever wants, is a kid to go back and revise. If you ask them to write a persuasive essay, they don't care as much. But if they know they're going on a stage in front of people, they're going to step up. They will go back, they will revise. Now, AI becomes a tool. AI helps you, give you feedback. AI helps them come up with images that help bring their visions to life. AI helps them with speaking because we have PowerPoint. There's like a presenter or speaker coach that gives them feedback on their speaking. So now AI is not a cheating tool. It's a tool that helps them get there. And that's a mindset shift on assessment. How are we assessing students? Because in a world where they could do their work in 3 seconds with AI, how do you even know they did it, right? If they're only handing you the end product,
right,
how do you even know they did it? But if you shift your thinking and you assess that learning process, then you know that they're learning and growing. And your A students might not actually be growing. They're just consistently getting A's. So when you assess the learning process, it really ensures that. And I think that's a mindset shift for a lot of leaders and a lot of teachers. And just being a leader, it's so important to understand these shifts of assessments and how AI could be used as a tool, because you're the one that's giving the teachers feedback and they're listening to you. So if you just give them, oh, why don't you try this? Or did you think about this? That's going to take that teacher that might have been resistant and make them maybe try it.
Well, I think there's a few important things to just unpack there. As you were talking about the assessment of the learning process, like I love that call out. I think it's such a critical distinction because real learning is messy and that is what's exciting. And so much of what we have set up as a system puts the motivator on the grade and not the motivator on the learning.
Right.
And when kids are motivated by a grade, well, we all can imagine a world where you work on that essay, you get the grade, you see the red ink, you throw it in the back of your desk, you never look at any of that feedback, and you're just absolutely demotivated. And then you're supposed to sit through 45 minutes of content and absorb it. Like your brain is completely in a different space at that stage.
Yeah.
But when you called out the ability for students to try and fail, what just stood out to me is that's also the real world.
Risk taking. Yeah, you take
risk
risk
taking, and leaders that can create autonomy for anybody, whether it's an employee or whether it's a colleague, to fail and reflect. I feel like that is such an important factor. What I'm curious
so
about,
great about like with the portfolios is like you can reflect. That is for me the biggest piece. Like, yeah, I want to see the end product, but I want to hear the student's reflection more than the actual end product.
And I'm just curious, like, as we're thinking about reflection, like as a former teacher, like we were really always taught, like, reflect on what's working and what's not. And whether you do it or you don't, that's neither here nor there. But I'm curious, like, what does it look like to bring a mindset of reflection into a school district? If you have any experience, like helping teachers model that effectively so a student understands it. And something that I'm always cognizant of when we think about these competencies is a student is going to be able to undergo authentic experiences to develop communication and critical thinking. But how do we get the student to recognize that they're developing communication and critical thinking?
I do think you need to model for students. I think even when I teach AI things or anything, you have to explicitly teach these things. We think students know how to use technology. We think they know how to reflect. We think they know how to do. They probably don't. So you need to explicitly teach each skill, like every single skill you need to teach. So reflection, I think, is a skill. I think as an educator or leader, you can give them an example like, oh, I was creating your assignment or I was grading your assignments and I was reflecting after I looked at your work and you just model what it could and should look like. And I think that modeling is just really important.
Building transparency and trust in the classroom, I think, is a big factor. And I loved when I was classroom teaching and I would come in with something that I had no idea what I was about to do. And I would tell my students, we're trying something brand new today. And if it works, we're going to have a great experience. But if it doesn't work, we're going to figure out what went wrong here together. And we're going to have a good experience figuring it out. Right. And
that's where the learning is there, right there. Just like me throwing the VR headsets in front of the kids and telling them to figure it out. If you can figure something out and first of all, that's innovation right there. But you're going to be successful at life because you'll figure anything out.
As we're wrapping up the conversation, I feel like we're at a teetering point between traditional systems transforming into these, competency-focused systems of the future. So, final thoughts on why you see it critical for us to engage in a reboot around this and bring in these new systems and adjust mindsets and shift how we're teaching and learning and measuring student growth. And why is this critical for the future of where we're moving in our education system?
Our educational system was designed in a very different time when we had factory workers and things like it was designed not for this world. I've always believed that education needed to change. I don't think in the real world you sit in desks in rows facing the front doing the same thing that everyone else is doing. That's not the world, right? That's not life. You can go and visit, and it's sad, it's usually in charter schools or private schools, that they're still learning, but they're like personalized learning, right, or they're more engaged, or it's more project-based learning. It works. It works for them. It just, public schools haven't really adopted this. So I think there are ways to do it. I think our job, like I mentioned before, is to prepare students for their future. So that is why we all went into this field, and that's something that we need to do. In a world where the AI can do their work for them, then what's the point of the work? And that's really it. Like, it's not about the AI. People think I talk about actually the AI. I really talk about rethinking teaching, learning, and assessment. Right. It's something I've always felt from when I was a very young student, sitting in desks and rows, watching my teacher turn around and write on the board. It's not something I enjoyed. It's not something I ever wanted for my own students when I was a teacher. And it's time, because the AI can do your work for you. So you need to change the work. You have no choice. And your job is to prepare students for their future. And this is a very big part of their future. So I think we have to do it for them.
We're talking about rethinking teaching, learning, assessment so we can prepare students for their future. Alana, thank you so much for joining us here on the show. We'll put some information in the show notes where they can find out more about the generative age, grab a copy of the book, and just kind of follow along with some of the innovative work that you're doing. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me.
That was visionary leader, author, podcaster, speaker, and the 2025 COSN CTO of the Year, Alana Winnick. Hey, thanks for listening to the show, and make sure to hit the follow button on your podcast app so you never miss an episode. I'm Jordan Lewis, and you've been listening to the Growth Over Grades podcast.